Hello, and good evening. Hope you had a good Sunday. And we're back. Today's reading was Genesis 19 to 21. And it was I'm not particularly been looking forward to talking about this one, just because of the nature of some of the content that that the Bible records and that the Bible speaks about. Which is it's what it's the historical account, and so we can't get away from it. But I guess trigger warning, um for anyone who maybe has gone through some sexual abuse. We have a bit of that today. So sorry, we're looking at, in chapter 19, Sodom and Gomorrah, the two angels that Abraham has just left, that Abraham was negotiating for, the sparing of Sodom. They arrived there, and when they reached the city gate, they were looking to stay there, and Lot insisted that they go with him, that he makes them some food. Whether or not Lot recognized who they were, that they were angels of the Lord, I'm not sure. I don't know. Um, later on, by the city's response, it's obvious that the city don't necessarily see that they are angels. But whether or not Lot did, I don't. It doesn't specifically say it. It says that he insisted that they come with him, and then he goes and makes them a meal. Um, the thing that is significant to me is they wanted to stay there. They said, "No, we will stay here. We're cool." And Lot insisted that they come with him, possibly because Lot knew what the people would likely try, and he was trying to spare these guys. But that stood out to me. If he had let them sort of stay there, I imagine he would have got caught up in Sodom and Gomorrah's destruction, because, well, they wouldn't have got him out. So I find that very interesting, that possibly his insisting that they come with him, um, probably because he knows that the people are going to hurt them in some way, was his confirming, that he was righteous in that sense, Not him confirming it, but actually proved that he was righteous in that he knew the right thing to do, and forced it, insisted that it was done. Because I don't imagine he knew that they could, yeah, whatever the case is. I think his insistence to do the right thing saved him to some extent, because it was his bringing them in, and sort of they informing him to leave, that resulted in his being saved and spared. So that was obviously in accordance with what God wanted to do anyway with them, because God was sparing Lot on Abraham's behalf. But that's interesting all the same. Uh, when the angels do get to Lot, they warn him. Um, they want him to get out so that he's not caught up in the destruction. And they tell him to get everyone out, get his family out, get his daughter's fiancés out, you know. And he goes and he tells them, and they laugh at him. Now it's interesting. Anita was just listening to a sermon, and the guy preaching was talking about how to reject a prophetic insight can sometimes be very dangerous or costly at the very least. When Lot went to tell the daughter's fiancés, God is going to destroy this place, let's go, they thought he was joking and ignored him and stayed. I know their fate. And so I think the other thing, or another thing to pick up from this, is to be mindful of the words that we receive, especially those that are from God, because those could be the difference between you making it out alive. So yeah, uh, the angels eventually tell, the guys of the city, men young and old, which is it strikes me that they make that distinction, come to get them so that they can assault them, grape them, for lack of a better way of putting it. And I think this has to be indicative of the state of that city, that two foreigners can come into the city and there can be a mob of adult men that want to abuse the foreigners for no other reason than just they are foreigners that are present, you know. And I think further showing the state, and I guess for me, I see this as consequence of being in such a place for so long. Lot's response, in as much as it's noble to want to protect the visitors, his response is to offer up his daughters. Possibly, possibly he may have suspected that the daughter's fiancés wouldn't let anything happen to them. Maybe, but it didn't necessarily sound like that was his backup plan. And even if it was, super risky. But for the whole, a group of men to come with this in mind, agreeing amongst themselves that this was acceptable, is terrifying. And that Lot's alternative was even acceptable to himself, again, also suggests to me that maybe he had been amongst these people for too long to think that that was okay to offer up his daughters to face whatever they were going to do to the visitors. I think it's indicative of maybe he's been around them too long for that to be okay to him. Um, Now, I guess the argument can be made that he knew these were angels and viewed the angels of such, high esteem as to want to sacrifice his daughters for them. But what I think we will come to realize, and what I've noticed in the word, is that human sacrifice is never what God wants. He'd never want for you to sacrifice your daughter for him, and in such a way as well. So anyway, the angels come and they blind all the men and they make that distinction, young and old, so that they couldn't actually do what they wanted to do. But then they insist that Lot gets out of the city, and they tell Lot to go to the mountains. Now, for whatever reason, Lot then says, no, you can't go to the mountains. They should let him go to a nearby village. And it's like, okay, cool. Go, go, go. Don't look back. And of course, we know the story. Lot's wife does look back and gets turned into a pillar of salt. I can't. I should look into this. Why salt? Like, I've literally written in my notes, why salt? And that's something I will come back to. But at the very least, it's the idea of her being unwilling to let go. And again, it speaks to me of how the place had corrupted them, you know, that she wanted to hold on to whatever she had so much so that she disobeyed when she was running, knowing that these are angels of God, and gets turned into a pillar of salt and loses her life. Um, and then in their flight, they go out to they go out and hide in the city, and then Lot is scared of the people, so he goes into the mountains anyway. So he ended up where the angels told him to go in the first place. Then we have Lot's daughters making the decision that they've lost their fiancés, and so they're going to drug their dad, sleep with him, and have kids by them. And again, I can't help but think this is also as a result of the corruption of being in such a place. And so I think, the wise adage, and I'm not elevating it to the state of Bible at all, but the wise adage that bad company corrupts good morals, I think, is very true. Because every member of Lot's family, having been in this place amongst his people, is demonstrating some level of corruption. Lot offers up his daughters. Lot's wife can't let go. And Lot's daughters seemingly think that, you know, the destruction of this town somehow means they will never find partners again, drug their dad and sleep with him. Um, uh, I can't help but think that their being in a place of such corruption as to warrant God's destruction probably contributed to their seemingly warped sense of what's acceptable and what isn't. Anyway, through those relations, Moab, um, the older daughter has Moab, and he becomes the ancestor of the Moabites, and the younger daughter has the ancestor of the Ammonites, both of which who are become enemies of God, um, and become a people that are not accepted into God's people up until the 20th or so generation, um, of which Ruth was a Moabite. But after that sort of period, and was brought back in the most gracious of ways, in as much as to become, David and thus Jesus's ancestor. In chapter 20, we see Abraham again also pull out the sister card um, when he moves to live in, I think, Gerar, I'm butchering the name. But Abraham is also an interesting one, right? Because he's again demonstrated such faith as to be accounted as righteousness unto him, but he doesn't seem to believe God would protect him. And so when he went into Egypt, he did, the same thing. So there's his sister, Sarah gets taken to Pharaoh. And now when he moves to Gerar, he's done the same thing again. Even after God bailed him out in Egypt. So sorry. And so you could say, there's precedent for God protecting you. He again pulls the same card, and King Abimelech um, is stopped by a dream from taking Sarah in as much as he's welcoming her into his harem. Um, and he again reprimands Abraham for nearly bringing destruction upon him. Now, again, I find it interesting to point this out, but Sarah wasn't. She was picked because of her physical beauty, even at 90, because she's closing in on 90 now. Um, but the king brought her into his harem, which are literally those that are just there for his sort of sexual gratification more than anything. It's not because she had such great personality or was such an obedient and subservient wife or whatever. It was because she was physically appealing. So that's an interesting thing about Sarah. But anyway, so eventually has her child. Finally, Isaac is born. And then 21, later on, we come to see that Hagar and Ishmael are making fun of Isaac, which, again, it seems Hagar also doesn't learn her lessons, does she? Um, but this gets her thrown out. And again, God sort of provides, comforts her, provides for her and Ishmael. But it is their own fault, for antagonizing the real legitimate son. Um, but they're not left on their ones. They're not left alone. So in as much as again they're in the predicament that they're in by their own doing, God doesn't just leave them to deal with it, which is grace. And then, we have this interesting thing where, again, King Abimelech comes to Abraham and goes into covenant with him because, like, look, it's clear God is with you. So don't deceive us and be at peace with us. And here, let's get into covenant to prove that. And there's this interesting thing about the well, which I'm not quite sure what the significance is right now. But, Abraham also effectively makes a proof that it's his well with the extra lambs that he brings to offer. The extra sacrifice. I can't remember if they're lambs. I'm too tired to check. But yeah, that's that was Jan 19 to 21. Let me just check what tomorrow's reading will be. In the meantime, I do hope that this is a blessing to you. I hope that this encourages you. I've been super encouraged by some of the responses I get. Pastor Laia, Mum being and Dad, Pastor Laia and Pastor Emmanuel, being very, very encouraging. So yeah, I hope this encourages you too to pick up the word, spend some time in the Bible every single day. It can't hurt. It absolutely cannot hurt, and it's only great. Tomorrow's reading is Genesis 22 to 24. I am beat, and I'm going to head out to sleep. And I hope you guys have a blessed day tomorrow and a blessed week. All right, that was a quick one, and I'm out. Peace out.